What if I told you that in a single moment during a routine congressional hearing, the quiet truth about one of the darkest scandals in modern American history almost slipped out, and the people in the room who were supposed to answer for it suddenly froze? Imagine watching a sitting member of Congress list categories of powerful men, bankers, billionaires, royalty, entertainment elites, whose names appear inside official FBI files tied to Jeffrey Epstein. And then imagine the FBI director, under oath, responding not with denial but with something far more unsettling: distance, ambiguity, and a refusal to say what he has seen.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6th story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007, and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of 2 different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in live time.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice and FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file. And I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous
Gentleman
consent
yields back.
request.
Unanimous consent request from the gentleman from New York.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce an unsigned memorandum from July 7th, 2025 that says we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties with the insignia of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Without objection.
What you're about to hear is not rumor, not internet speculation, not fringe chatter. These were statements made in a live government hearing, echoed through official documents, victims' testimonies, and investigations that have lasted decades. And nothing about the exchange felt accidental. It started with Representative Thomas Massie asking questions that no one ever asks directly on camera. He pushed for clarity, for accountability, for confirmation that the files the FBI possesses don't just mention Epstein but detail the powerful men he allegedly trafficked victims to. According to the victims themselves, women who cooperated with the FBI, there are documents naming at least 20 individuals connected to Epstein's trafficking ring. And this wasn't a vague claim. One of the names referenced out loud was a top banking executive. Alongside him, victims described a Hollywood producer with hundreds of millions to his name, a royal prince, a high-profile music figure, a major banker, a government official, a former politician, a luxury car magnate from Italy, a rock star, a magician, and at least 6 billionaires, including one from Canada. That list alone sounded like a secret guest list to the world's most exclusive nightmare. And yet when Massie asked directly whether the FBI has launched investigations into these individuals, the director didn't say they don't exist. He didn't say the documents were fake. He didn't say the victims were wrong. Instead, he said something that raised even more questions. He said he hadn't personally reviewed the documents. Think about that. The most sensitive criminal case involving some of the wealthiest people alive, a case that has haunted American institutions for nearly 2 decades, a case that sparked arrests, investigations, international headlines, and the FBI director hasn't personally reviewed the files naming the alleged offenders. Even Massie seemed stunned. He asked again, how can you say there are no credible names if you haven't seen the documents? How can you testify under oath that Epstein trafficked no one but himself when victims have provided names? The director's answer was simple and yet deeply revealing. He said multiple U.S. attorney offices over the years determined there was no credible evidence. That was their word, credible. But credibility is a tricky word when the very institutions deciding what counts as credible are the same ones being accused of protecting the powerful. Victims have been saying for decades that their words were ignored, dismissed, or not taken seriously. Epstein himself seemed to operate in plain sight for years, despite repeated reports, allegations, and even testimonies. So when the director said the victims' statements weren't credible, many viewers heard something else. They heard a system protecting itself. But the moment that truly shifted the energy in the room was when Massie raised the issue of intelligence involvement. Years ago, former Labor Secretary Alex Acosta claimed he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and that he should leave the case alone. Acosta didn't elaborate. He didn't explain what that meant. He simply said it, and the world moved on. But that statement has haunted every discussion of Epstein since. If Epstein was tied to intelligence, whose intelligence? And how deeply? Rumors online have long speculated that Epstein's connections stretched into intelligence circles. Reports have highlighted strange meetings, eyebrow-raising friendships, and unexplained coincidences involving people in intelligence communities. And some journalists uncovered calendars and logs showing Epstein meeting with high-level individuals, including a former CIA chief and an Obama-era official. None of this proves anything, but it raises questions. And in the hearing, those questions returned with renewed force. Massie asked the FBI director whether he had seen the CIA's file on Epstein. The director hesitated. He said he didn't know whether such a file existed. He said that if it did, and if it hadn't already been shared, the FBI would look at any new investigative leads. Think about the phrasing, not there is no CIA file, not we have full interagency transparency, just uncertainty. That uncertainty has defined the entire Epstein saga. Agencies claim to investigate, but rarely share. Victims speak but are often doubted. Documents exist, but names are redacted. And whenever questions get too close to powerful people, the answers begin to blur. The hearing also exposed a startling contradiction about transparency. Earlier this year, the Department of Justice held a carefully orchestrated event where the Attorney General provided binders of documents to social media influencers. It was a moment meant to showcase transparency, to appear modern, open, accessible. But when asked whether the victims themselves could meet with officials, the FBI director didn't offer the same enthusiasm. He redirected. He said his agents would meet with anyone who had new information. He never said he would meet with the victims himself. That silence spoke volumes. Victims aren't information. They are human beings who lived through horrors that most people cannot imagine. Their stories deserve respect, not bureaucratic distance. And when unredacted victim information was accidentally released in a rush earlier this year, it only deepened the sense that these institutions weren't protecting them, they were mishandling them. These were people who trusted the system to bring accountability. Instead, their private details were exposed while the names of the powerful remained hidden. As the questioning continued, the hearing shifted into broader territory, unresolved investigations that have lingered for years without clarity. Massie brought up the January 6 pipe bomb incident. To this day, despite cameras, devices, and massive investigations, the identity of the individual behind the bombs remains unknown. He also asked about the Las Vegas shooter's motive, another case that ended with more unanswered questions than resolved ones. The pattern seemed impossible to ignore. Cases involving ordinary suspects are often solved quickly, efficiently, publicly. But cases involving politically sensitive, high-profile, or institutionally embarrassing details drag on or fade away, leaving the public in the dark. And Epstein's case sits at the center of that pattern. One of the most striking details of the hearing was how direct Massie was. He referenced specific documents, including FD 302's official FBI interview records. He noted that victims named the men who abused them. He said those names were in the files. He asked whether investigations had been launched, and not once did the FBI director deny that these names exist. Not once did he dispute that victims made these statements. The only defense he offered was that the evidence wasn't deemed credible. But the question at the heart of this hearing wasn't whether individual prosecutors made judgments years ago. It was whether the system ever intended to hold powerful men accountable in the first place. For decades, the Epstein story has been dominated by secrecy, sealed documents, private calendars, redacted names, quiet settlements, and half-finished investigations. The public has only seen fragments, pieces that slipped through cracks or were forced into the light by journalists, courts, or courageous victims. Each time new information emerges, it paints a picture not of a lone predator, but of a network of influence, protection, and silence. A network where justice bends to wealth, where victims are sidelined, and where institutions fear the truth because the truth might expose them. The hearing also highlighted a deeper structural issue: agencies determining their own scope of accountability. If the FBI decides the evidence isn't credible, that's the end of the line. If prosecutors choose not to pursue a case, the files remain sealed. If intelligence agencies possess information, they aren't required to share it unless they choose to. There is no external referee. The same system accused of ignoring evidence is the one that decides whether the evidence matters. And that circular logic is what has kept the Epstein case unresolved for decades. Even the most disturbing details, victims naming the men who abused them, documents listing categories of powerful individuals, remain locked away behind legal walls. And when the FBI director says he hasn't reviewed them personally, the message it sends is unmistakable. The specifics don't matter to those in charge. The priority is containment, not accountability, and containment is easier when chaos, confusion, and ambiguity cloud the facts. But the most important part of this story isn't the institutions or the documents, it's the victims. Many of them have waited years, some over a decade, for accountability. Some have passed away without ever seeing justice. Their courage has been extraordinary. They worked with law enforcement. They sat for interviews. They named names. They relived trauma, and still the people they accused continue to live freely, shielded behind wealth, influence, and institutional hesitation. That's why this hearing struck such a nerve. It wasn't just a political moment. It was a glimpse into the limits of truth inside a system built to protect itself. It showed how deep the resistance runs when accountability threatens the powerful. It revealed how quickly facts turn into shadows once they enter classified spaces. And it reminded us that justice is not always a straight line. Sometimes it is a maze built intentionally to exhaust those who seek answers. The exchange ended with a simple but powerful question: if the people responsible for exposing the truth refuse to acknowledge what they know, who will? And that question is bigger than Epstein. It touches every major scandal where institutions promise transparency but deliver only carefully curated fragments. It reflects a culture where secrecy is normalized, where public trust erodes, and where the truth is filtered before it reaches the public. And hearings like this one don't just expose facts, they expose the boundaries around the facts. As you think about everything revealed, everything hinted at, everything left unsaid, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This story isn't over. More files exist, more names are inside them. More victims are waiting, and every time a hearing like this takes place, the cracks grow a little wider. Eventually something breaks through. If you believe powerful people should face the same justice as everyone else, if you believe victims deserve truth, not silence, and if you're tired of institutions choosing protection over accountability, make sure you don't miss what comes next. Because the only way any of this comes to light is if people keep watching, keep asking, and refuse to let this story fade. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay informed as we uncover more of what's really going on inside America's most secretive institutions, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications. This is where we cut through the noise, challenge the narrative, and follow the truth wherever it leads. Stay curious, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.